So, hello, everybody. My name is Richard Franklin, and I'm the Director of Business Development with NZTE, based in Toronto, Ontario. Before we start, I'd just like to say that if your business is looking at the US or other markets, remember that New Zealand Trade and Enterprise is here to support you. There are a wealth of resources, all of them free, including guides for all of our major trading markets. How-to articles, for example, for SaaS businesses, and insights from Kiwi tech companies operating overseas. You're going to hear from one today. So to get there, please go to getthere.nz/tech, two T's, getthere.nz.tech to learn more. Thanks. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jamie McDonald. Jamie is the CEO of Storypark, based in Wellington, and he has been working, or Storypark has been working with NZTE in their international expansion over the last couple of years. And Jamie is going to speak about Canada. But before then, Jamie, would you like to start off and tell us more about Storypark, what you do, where you've been, and how things have been going so far?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so Storypark all started about 11 years ago now. It started with a question from my mum. Jamie, can you build me a website, please? I need to find a way of better connecting children with the learning that's happening at her childcare centre. At the time, she was running a childcare centre right at the bottom of the South Island in a place called Gore in New Zealand. And she was, and I was building websites. So she asked me to build her a website. And like any good boy, you do what your mom says, and who knows, it might turn into a big business one day. So yeah, I built her a website. Basically, it was just a way for teachers to share the learning that was happening every day with the parents in her community, and effectively every child had their own password protected blog. So it's pretty simple. About maybe 6 months later, she came back to me with all this feedback around how it was working the way she wanted it to. It was people were feeling more connected, that sort of thing. But there was also a whole bunch of unexpected outcomes that were happening as well, where parents were feeling more trust for the teachers, and teachers are feeling more recognized for the work they were doing. And then there was this two-way kind of reciprocal learning relationship as well happening. So it seemed like such a good idea that instead of just continuing to build out my mum's backlog, which was getting pretty long, we decided to turn it into a business and scale it.
Excellent. So obviously starting in New Zealand, and where was your next step after that in the whole internationalization conversation?
Yeah, so New Zealand went it felt slow at the time, but in hindsight, the first few years, went relatively quickly. We built a pilot. We got an early customer that had really large geographic distribution across New Zealand, and that piqued the interest of some customers over in Australia. So Australia was our next step.
Got it. And then from there, how did things shape out outside of New Zealand? So you're in New Zealand, obviously that's at home. Australia is number two. Then what happened next?
Yeah, so that was a bit longer. So the Australian market for us, Australia is still our largest market. So yes. Australia is our largest market, New Zealand's our second largest, and then we started to see a little bit of organic growth in a whole bunch of other markets. So we didn't really expect this, but we built something that had a real universal kind of application where, it turns out that parents want to see what their children are doing and what they're learning. And that window wasn't available until Storypark and some of our competitors came along. So with I think we got to about 40 different countries with a few different childcare centres in, nothing huge, but just a little sprinkling across the planet. And we started to look at where we needed to focus. And so that's when we engaged with NZTE and we did some market research. And in that list, we're looking for English-speaking countries, and we're looking for curriculum alignment with what we'd built, because our product is a way of sharing and documenting learning. So we needed to make sure that the countries and the markets we're looking at also had an interest in recording learning in a similar way. And so that's when we we decided we're going to focus in on Canada. And, there's a number of reasons for that, and largely around, being a Commonwealth country, being English speaking, and having and because of, I suppose, that some of the early adopters we had over there, they were looking at how we were doing things in New Zealand as well. So it just seemed quite aligned with the way that we were already set up.
Yeah, and it's a good segue into the next part of our conversation, because most people, when they are looking at North America, they pick the United States first. Obviously, that is the larger market, but you decided to do things a little differently. For some very good reasons, to focus on Canada, specifically for some really good reasons, as you just mentioned, and then to really work and develop Canada before even thinking about the States or other parts of the world. It's a bit of a unique twist that we on the North American side of NZTE don't see very often. So ultimately, then, Canada's big. It's big and it's not. It's one of these conversations, is that it's as everyone would listening here know, just take a look at a map. It's geographically big, but there's only 30 million people, and it's spread out across a very wide mass. And it's usually, with as you and I know, heavily populated centers. Toronto, where I live, for example, Vancouver, Montreal, etc. How was your go-to-market approach, I should say, or the question is, how did you consider selling a technology in an environment like this, which is very, very vast, but sparsely populated for the most part? How did you focus? Tell us how your approach was, and we'll get to the French in a second if we have time. But how was your approach in evaluating the best way to tackle Canada?
Yeah, so I think I'll start a few years before we really took a serious go at it. So just before COVID, as we were gaining momentum in Australia, and we decided we needed to expand out, and we followed that kind of that lead towards Canada, where we had some interest. It was really, really organic. Like, we had one person on the ground. My business partner would fly over for his wife's actually Canadian as well. So that all plays into the decisions to focus.
Never hurts. Yeah.
So, in retrofitting the decision to go to Canada, we can make a really strong case for why Canada. But to be honest, there was a lot of organic decisions that sort of led towards us having a bit more momentum and a bit more presence in that market. So early on, when he was spending a bunch of time over there, he started working with local governing bodies and potential and trying to build partnerships with industry groups and childcare specific membership bodies and things like that. So that was a way that we got our name out there, and we built up a bit of a following. We also did a lot of sort of brand campaigns and things like that using social media, and so we did a few things like that. All of that gave us a little bit of success, and that was sort of our approach, I guess, pre-COVID. We never got a runaway home run. And I think what we were doing to that point wasn't really scalable, probably because of those reasons that you sort of outlined, geographic disperse and all those sorts of things. And also the price point. We don't have early childhood as a sector isn't a sector with a lot of money. So we've priced it, in a really fair way for the sector to be able to afford the services that we have. And we've always had our purpose kind of at the center of what we do. So we don't want to make price an issue. So in terms of pricing it at a low price point, we needed to be really creative about how to get there. So to be honest, before COVID, that wasn't really working. So even before COVID, we decided we're going to put the brakes on and pull out of Canada. And then COVID hit, and it was like, well, that looks like the best decision ever, because Canada went into lockdown for a year. So we had just, we just kind of dodged that one a little bit and focused on, reevaluating and doing new market analysis. And then COVID hit, we really focused on just our current customer base, supporting them. Early childhood centres had a lot of like a lot of sectors had a lot of uncertainty, especially in those early days, and a lot of centres were closed. We didn't realise, the benefits of some tech companies have had some benefits. So we're on Zoom at the moment, obviously huge benefits from something like COVID. For Storypark, there were some benefits in terms of tech adoption, with childcare centres needing to find ways to connect to families. So I think, in New Zealand and Australia and in Canada, all over the world, educators were looking at, how do I stay in touch with families, and how do I stay in touch with and stay safe when parents aren't able to come into the centre and do drop-offs and things like that. And so after COVID, when we were looking back at where to next, I suppose, like, it's not really after COVID, but after the lockdowns, we were going, okay, well, we still need to find ways outside of ANZ if we want to be a global leader. And so we looked at Canada again, and what we'd noticed is that a lot of the services that had adopted adopted Storypark before COVID had continued to use it, and had continued to find more and more benefit during COVID, when they couldn't have children at the site at their centres, or they couldn't have parents coming onto the site. It was ways of managing drop-off. It was ways of keeping those connections, being able to read stories to children remotely, things like that. So that tech adoption kind of increased. And when we then we engaged with NZTE again, and we're like, okay, well, let's make a good go of this, and how are we going to do it differently from the first time, which was pretty slow, but how are we going to build on the momentum of tech adoption and leverage the brand that we have. And so our second approach with NZTE was really around building a direct sales team over in the market. And we chose to focus on Ontario and Toronto specifically, in terms of where our team's based and where we're really focusing on our customers. Because, although you said, Canada's really geographically dispersed, there's a huge concentration in Ontario and around Toronto.
It's the biggest province for sure.
Yeah. So now we built that direct sales team, and we've been doing a lot of outbound calling, and we've continued to build upon our brand kind of in the market presence, our marketing, and starting to go to more events now as well, and continue to build upon our partnerships.
Excellent. So education here, and you and I've talked about this before, but education here as a sector is fiercely provincially managed. Ontario Ministry of Education versus, for instance, the British Columbian Ministry of Education or Nova Scotia Ministry of Education might have different ways of administering the sector and who operates and how. Has that been an issue or challenge for you so far, or is that something that you still manage to work with or work around?
Yeah, I guess every business has different challenges, and the fragmented landscape for early childhood is really one of the challenges that we've always faced. Even in New Zealand, which is its tiny little population with one curriculum, there's so much diversity in how childcare centres are run, and that's because the market is it's a very financially restrained market. It's taken a long time for funding to go to that market, even though it's one of the most important things that we could possibly invest in. So in Canada, it's no different. It's super fragmented. There'll be centres that will use one curriculum one way, and then other centres that use it another way. So because of that, we've built our product to be really, really flexible, and we've had to try and think about how could you fit in curriculums from all over the world, and then how do you create different iterations in different instances. Like a simple kind of exaggerated example is that my mum's childcare centre down in Gore in Southland is a rural area, and a lot of the children go out duck hunting and shooting with their dads and mums and that sort of thing. Now that is it's a learning experience for sure, and it's something that I did, and it's freezing cold on those winter mornings when we went duck shooting with my dad. But in Wellington or in an urban city or in Toronto, handling guns and things like that. It's just a completely, it wouldn't even be part of the curriculum at all, or it'd be a completely different lens on it. And so my mother would have police officers come in to her centre and teach them how to get fake gun licenses and things like that. Whereas in Wellington, you would be much more concerned about road safety and things like that. So, so that's just an example of like how diverse the learning is in these environments. So then the curriculum, when you try to wrap that around, that just gets applied in so many different ways. And so for us, we've always built to try and create something that could create centralized curriculums for large groups of centers, but then be able to take a copy of that and then adapt it and change it.
Modify it. Got it.
Yeah, and so that's really helped us in North America and Canada as well, where we've been able to align our system and our software with the local curriculum so they can embed it and they can then start to roll it out. And actually, it gives them a great way of seeing how their curriculum is being applied and how their philosophies and things are being used as well, because there's a lot of data and analytics that go along with that tool as well.
Understood. This is, wonderful feedback and great information, Jamie. I mean, we're coming into landing now, but just a couple more that I would have for you really is, one, I guess, is highlights, lesson learned that you would like to, anything that you could flag. I mean, you're still in the mix of it, but so far, how have things been? Any highlights or anything that you would particularly like to point out as something that people such as yourselves and other tech companies need to consider?
Yeah, for sure. Heaps of learnings. I guess like one of our values at Storypark has been relentlessly curious. So, going into the market, knowing we don't know, going in with an open mind, being prepared to follow all sorts of different opportunities and leads, and not holding on too tightly to your own beliefs. I think that was a really important thing for us to adopt, especially, when it comes to the different culture. Although it feels, we love Canadians love Kiwis, and we get on really well, there are subtle differences and nuances between our cultures and how we do business, how we hire people, how we manage people, how we, what we focus on, those sorts of things, lots and lots of differences. So I think go in with an open mind. That's probably the first thing. Yeah. Be relentlessly curious. The other thing that, the NZT plug here is like, it's a really important one because we couldn't have done it without NZT and people like South Richard and people like, we've got our customer managers, Louisa, who's been really helpful. And, the way that NZT has really supported us has been through connecting us with local people and getting us, there's a whole bunch of admin that you need to do when you go into a new market. And, any entrepreneur or any business person, I mean, I haven't met any of my peers that just like, get up every morning and go, yes, I want to set up bank accounts and I want to go and physically, I want to go and sign 10 documents and I want to go and chase all my shareholders for things. And I want to, I haven't met anyone like that. So having kind of like connections in market, having people who can support us, different agencies, different service providers, and those connections that NZTE has provided have been absolutely critical. One of which, is we've got a really experienced sales mentor and coach, Butch, who's been working with us, and that has just working with him has saved us so much time in how we recruit, how we think about building out our sales process, and the leader that has been leading that team, my chief revenue officer, Katie, she has come from a product background, so having which has given us so much advantages. She's really taking a scientific method to all of our sales and outbound and growth. How we think about overcoming objections, how we adapt our offering, and how we adapt to the market. But with Butch supplementing her product skills with that sales experience, that's been critical. So yeah, definitely go in humble, know you don't know, be willing to try things, and engage with those services that we have available, like NZTE and their network.
Wonderful. And Jamie McDonald of Storypark, thank you very much. This has been a great conversation, and you and I are always talking, and your team are always in touch. So looking forward to always more what you can, seeing what Storypark will do. For those of you watching online, you can find Storypark at www.storypark.com. That one's very easy. For us in Canada, I just wanted to let everyone know is that we are planning ourselves, NZTE Canada, an international acceleration program in Waterloo region, Ontario. Waterloo is the home of BlackBerry Research in Motion. It's one of North America's leading tech hubs. We'll be publishing more information on that as that gets filled out and signed. And please remember, if you're trying to expand your technology company globally, NZTE is here to get you there. Again, visit getthere.nz/tech, 2 T's. Again, getthere.nz/tech to find out how. And please do, when you go there, scroll down to the bottom. You will see a little claim that says, a tile, I should say, that says Tech Hubs in Canada. Which discusses Canada's major technology hubs and what it has to offer you and your business. But thank you for TP Tech Week 2023. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.